If you get it right, you'll get all the accolades. If you get it wrong, you'll probably get a kick up the bum. But it's okay because we'll learn from it and we'll fix it. If you're still trying to handle everything, then that is not what you set out to do. If you delegate this, if you actually let go and somebody gets it wrong, that doesn't mean it's your job to fix it. It's still their job to fix it. Welcome to the latest edition of the Mastermind for Business podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about bottlenecks. Do you feel like your business is just bottlenecked? Truth is, you may actually be the cause. We'll unpack that and find some solutions right now.
If you want more time, money, freedom, and have a business that's not reliant on you, then you're in the right place. Each week, Mark Creedon, along with some of the very best business minds in the world, will take you through simple, practical steps you can take to create the business you always wanted. From his own practical experience, Mark will show you how to work less, make more, and get the business you always wanted, the one that you deserve. Now here's your host, one of Australia's most sought-after business coaches, Mark Creedon.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Mastermind for Business podcast. We're talking about bottlenecks, and joining us in the chair, Caroline.
Hello.
Great to have you. Well-deserved applause, I might add. We were just talking off air, Caroline, about your appearance fee, and I've decided that we're just going to double it. Do you know? I think that's triple it.
Triple.
Yeah.
Triple sounds nice.
Well, 000, still zero. Let's talk about bottlenecks, right? So one of the things that we see in Mastermind is a lot of clients come to us saying, I just feel like my business is stuck. It's been doing really well. It's been successful, making good money, got a good team, but it just feels like it's kind of ground to a halt, or I can't get things moving quickly enough. And so it feels like it's in a bottleneck. But the thing that we find most often is that they are actually the bottleneck.
I think so. Like often we'll say, and without sounding awful, a fish rots from the head down.
Yep.
The head and the brain has to be right.
Yep.
And then the rest of the fish will be healthy.
Yeah. So the thing that I see with bottlenecking is that there's a couple of things that I think that business owners do. And because you start the business, and when you first start the business, you do everything, right? So, if you're talking about a bricks and mortar business, you buy the milk, you order the stationery, you fix the jam in the photocopier, you replace the light bulbs, you clean the toilet, like you do everything. And as businesses grow, we see people let go of those kind of mundane or menial tasks, if you like. So they don't clean the toilet anymore, they get a cleaner in. They don't wash the dishes, they buy a dishwasher. But they don't often let go of some of the other, everything has to go through them. And the thing I think is that we've often seen businesses that are quite large, businesses that are turning over, $20 or $30 million, where the owner of the business is still in charge and everything goes through them. Because you've seen that.
100%.
And the problem is that when everything has to go through them, I think two things happen. The business starts to grind to a halt because it really is the true definition of a bottleneck, right? So when the business is quite small, you can handle all those things. You can juggle all those things. As the business gets bigger, everything has to come through you. If you carry that mindset, do you think not only do you become the bottleneck, but do you think that's empowering for the team that you've got around you?
No, I don't know that the team. Look, I think like if you go back to the start, when you first start doing something, you know that you're not necessarily going to get it right the first time, and you can blame yourself, and you have those fears that if you don't get it right, something's going to go wrong. But you've built that time where you've gained the confidence on it. But then the next level of that is the fear of letting go. If you let it go to somebody else, what's going to happen? You're out of control of that, and you're out of control of the outcome. We're comfortable with the control of the outcome.
So the reality is, when we've seen business owners being bottlenecks and we start, so one of the first things we do is we go, right, we've got to set some boundaries here. The first boundary is your own boundary, which means you've got to understand the highest and best use of your time, right? So they've actually got to, because they've got to value themselves, work out where they should be spending their time. The next thing is to work out your not to-do list. So what are all the things that you shouldn't be doing? How much of that transition do you think is impacted by them just being afraid to let go?
I think fear is a natural
Sure.
a natural aspect of anybody. It doesn't matter if you're a Richard Branson or if you're a newbie in the business world.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge part of those sorts of things, yeah.
When somebody joins Mastermind, so one of the first things that we do is we work out what's the highest and best use of their time, right? And it's what we call our genius, right? We're going to help you to find your genius. And so we get them working in their genius, and part of that genius process is to work out what is your not to-do list, right? Everybody's got a to-do list. We should have a not to-do list, like, the shit that you just shouldn't be doing. Dan Martell talks about the sort of the 4 time zones, and that's where we go, it's the zone of incompetence and zone of incompetence. But I think that you can teach them all the delegation skills in the world and they can make all of the not to-do lists. But until they move past that fear, then that process probably isn't going to work and they're going to continue to be the bottleneck. Would you agree?
I think so. Well, like one of the things that I think people as leaders need to do when they do delegate and get things, down to the next level and moved on so that they can do different things is to give the team the ability to make the decisions themselves, be accountable and to hold the position for themselves and the decisions for
Yeah, but
themselves.
what if they get it wrong? Like, what if they screw it up?
Well, how bad can it be? No one's going to die. Generally speaking, nobody's going to die on a decision that's made, you hope. But if they're in that position, you need to be able to trust the outcome. They're not going to get it right, and not getting it right is actually okay because it will also show sometimes that there are other holes that need fixing.
Right, plus they learn from it, don't they? So if they make a mistake, I had a conversation with one of the Metropole directors yesterday, and I said, well, it's your decision. I mean, if you get it right, you'll get all the accolades. If you get it wrong, you'll probably get a kick up the bum. But it's okay because we'll learn from it and we'll fix it. Do you know? I think if I let go of it and they screw it up, I'm just going to have to get in and fix it.
No, probably not. I'll probably have to fix it.
Yeah, but that's the...
Yes.
Whereas one of the things that I'm always saying to leaders is if you delegate this, if you actually let go and somebody gets it wrong, that doesn't mean it's your job to fix it. It's still their job to fix it. So that's what I would say. Go, listen, you do it. If you get it right, you get the accolades. If you get it wrong, it's okay, but you're going to have to fix it.
Yes.
I'll help you.
Yeah.
I'll guide you. I'll mentor you.
If you're delegating any job, it doesn't matter. You're always going to need to have certain expectations in there. How long is it going to take? Have they got the tools they need? Are the safety requirements there for what they have to do? And if they miss out on one of those, key things that you haven't provided, then sometimes it actually could be your mistake, not their mistake.
Yeah, sure.
Because you haven't provided that. Are they going to make mistakes? 100%. And in a lot of ways, you almost hope that they do make a mistake because then they're going to get trust to come back to you and say, do you know what? I got this wrong. That's okay. As an owner, you trusted that they would do that. And if they don't get it wrong, if they don't get it right, they don't get it right. It's okay.
Let's just segue for a minute and talk about mistakes because I've got a pretty clear theory on mistakes, and that is that I think that people making mistakes is a positive thing because they learn from it, right? It's not the absence of mistakes. Mistakes help you to continue to learn and to grow. But I always think if somebody comes into the business and makes a mistake, my question is, did you get up in the morning and say to yourself, right, I'm going to go to work and I'm going to make that mistake? In other words, was it deliberate? And if the answer is no, then let's just fucking get on with it.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? Let's just accept that sometimes shit happens. And as you say, as long as it's, not fatal, there's that saying, right, failure is not fatal. So as long as it's not fatal, then we can fix it. We can get on with it. So I think mistakes are a positive thing. How much do you think that plays on the mind of business owners, though, when they've got this fear of letting go? Do you think that there's a relevant, point there where they go, well, the reason I don't want to let go is because they might stuff it up?
I think that says more about the boss than the staff.
Yeah.
That you need to trust yourself that what you've prepared and then what you have ready to delegate is correct.
What about empowerment then? Because the way I look at it is if I want to get past that fear, then I've actually got to empower my people, right? I've got to empower them. I've got to give them permission to give it a shot. I've got to give them permission to make a mistake. I've got to give them permission to do what they need to do to make it happen so that it comes off my plate. Let's talk about you in leadership roles. How hard have you found it to empower people?
I actually enjoy empowering people. I don't say necessarily easy, but I think sometimes it's easier to empower other people than it is to empower yourself, because you can be quite hard on yourself.
Yeah.
And I think it's always easier looking into another window when it's not you in a lot of ways. I actually find empowering people a lot easier because it's easy to see what you've done and what hasn't worked for you.
Yep.
And sharing those things is actually quite rewarding. And it's nice for people to know, do you know what? I've been vulnerable in these situations. I have failed
Yep.
in these situations, and this is what I've learned. These tools will help you to not make those mistakes.
We're segueing on a few things. I want to come back to bottlenecking and how we stop somebody being the bottleneck, but I think this is all relevant. So what we've sort of said is that you've got to empower your people, right? You've actually got to let them do things. You've got to let go. You've got to let go. And there's this fear factor. If I let go and they screw it up, and the answer to that is, well, if you've empowered them and if you've made them feel comfortable that they can, even if they do make a mistake, that they can come to you and talk about it, then the likelihood of that fear factor sort of decreases. But we've spoken a little bit about empowerment. I think one of the things that I love about empowering people around us is sometimes you empower them to the point where you don't keep them.
Right. Yep.
And I'm thinking about Kathy,
Yes.
right? So probably, hands down one of the best assistants that we've had.
And hello, Kathy. Is she listening?
Hands down one of the best assistants we've had. Comes to us one day and says, you guys have just built me up as a person and helped empower me so much about me that I've got this dream I want to go off and chase. And as sad as we were to see her leave the business, it was kind of a pretty cool moment in lots of ways, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, it was nice.
She's going to go chase her dreams,
Yep.
which was in a completely different field.
Yep.
And something I didn't even actually realise at the time until she came to us and said, by the way, I've always wanted to do this. We go, well, okay, what are you doing here then? Off you go.
Yep. It was a journey it was interesting because it was a journey that she had to go through, where she was in a comfort zone of being in that support role. And she actually went above and beyond in a support role in a lot of ways. But then she had to believe that she could go past that. And that was really a really awesome transition to be a part of.
Yeah. Yeah. It's quite exciting when you can empower people to that level. Anyway, that was just a little bit of a segue. But I guess that the point I'm trying to make here is that, fear can hold you back. But if you let go of that fear, you can discover that empowering people is incredibly rewarding, and watching people step up around you and take responsibility. So let's talk about how we do that. So if you're listening to this right now and you're going, yeah, do you know what? Maybe I am the bottleneck. I reckon there's a few things that you could do. Number one, I think, Caroline, is set some boundaries. Let's talk about that. If we're talking about setting boundaries, what do you think that looks like?
I think just having clear expectations of the outcomes, times of those outcomes, and knowing that you're delegating the task as an entirety. They're taking authority. They're able to implement changes if those changes need to be done. They deserve the reward for those outcomes as well.
So you're delegating the responsibility, not just the
That's
task,
right?
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think, so we're talking about boundaries. It's about setting boundaries around what comes to you,
Yep.
right? Now, we've worked with quite large companies, again, where everything goes through the owner. And what happens is things take too long, but then also people just become afraid.
I don't necessarily think that it's afraid of the person or the leader that they're leading up. I think it's more of a fear of getting it wrong, of not meeting expectations.
Yep.
Letting people down, I think, can be a huge part of that.
It's a good point. So if you feel that you're the bottleneck and you need to let some go of some things, it's okay to you've got to give people, and we spoke about permission to fail, but you've almost got to give them permission to go, do you know what, I might not get this right. And I think you have to say, that's okay, you won't be letting me down.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You actually have that conversation. So boundaries around what comes to you, boundaries around what they're allowed to hand back, the old monkey management concept, right? What they're allowed to sort of try and give back to you and what you've got to resist. But I had a conversation with a mastermind client yesterday, and he said to me, one of the things I really want to do is, wherever possible, is spend time with my family.
Yep.
And I said to him, you actually have to set some boundaries around that. So you have to, rather than going, whenever possible, I'm going to spend time with my family, you have to lock that in. You know,
Put it in your diary. If it doesn't get diarised, it doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen, right?
It diesn't make you a bad person to diarise to spend time with your kids. You put the time in your diary so that you can't get interruptions because you want to spend time with your kids, and that's a huge part of our life.
So you've raised a good point, where I think that sometimes people sort of go, well, geez, what kind of a person are you if you've got to put into your calendar to call your mother or spend time with your spouse? Date night.
Oh, I think I do Thursday. You do
Yeah,
Wednesday.
boom, boom.
No, I think it's important, and it's not because it doesn't make you a bad person. It just is actually meaning that's becoming a priority. You're putting that as a priority for your week. Everybody works off calendars these days. A lot of us work on, a Calendly app or something like that integrates with our calendar. If you don't block out that time, someone can take up that time for you.
Yep.
So you have to value your time. It's important that you look after yourself, fit your oxygen masks first. Make those important things for you a priority.
Yeah. So if you're the bottleneck, you've got to let go. You've got to be brave enough to let go. You've got to overstep that fear. You've got to let people know that it's okay to make mistakes. You've got to empower them. You've got to set boundaries around what comes to you, what can come back to you, what has to go through you. So you actually have to give people a certain level of autonomy in decision making so that they go, I can make that decision. It's perfectly all right. It's okay. I can make a decision at that level. I think the other thing, and the other thing that you then mentioned is essentially preloading your calendar, right? So how you stop being the bottleneck is by having set times for things. Because, and I've been guilty of this, somebody comes to you with an issue and you go, yep, I'll get to that. And then you just never get to it.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'd pre-book that into my calendar, I'll get that tomorrow at 2:00, there's a fair likelihood it would actually happen. Mm. Yeah.
Yes, of course.
The point I'm trying to make is that these are ways that if you're listening to this now and you feel that, maybe I am actually the bottleneck, what are the things I can do? Let go, move past the fear, empower your people, let them know it's okay to make mistakes, set boundaries around what comes back to you, set boundaries around your time, lock things in advance in your calendar so that they actually get done at a dedicated time, and you can take them out of your headspace then, right? I think the other thing, Caroline, is AI. So what we should be looking at doing is, if you are the bottleneck and there's things that you can get other people to do, but are there things that you can get AI to help you with?
Today is so exciting. Being in business today is exciting. There are so many smarts that you can use as a business owner, as a team leader, that will just cut down your time just amazingly.
Yeah.
In 5 minutes, you can have a song written in 5 minutes time. You can have an email campaign created. You can have a procedure done.
Yeah.
It's endless about what you can create in a small period of time using AI, and fine tuning things, systemizing things. It's very exciting.
And so I think because often you're the bottleneck because you've got a whole list of things to do, and we know that time management's nonsense. It's actually about priority management. But I'll give you an example. So I was under a bit of pressure. We've got an intensive, our mastermind members, we get together 3 times a year on the Gold Coast, and I was under a bit of pressure to produce some content for the upcoming intensive. Now, I knew that what I wanted to speak about, because it's all about belief. It's about self-belief, belief in others, belief in your product and service, belief in your team, and belief in you. And I wanted to use Richard Branson, who you mentioned earlier. I wanted to use Richard Branson as an example. And so I found that book, Let's Not Screw It, Let's Just Do It by Richard Branson. I thought, all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly read that book. I've read it before, but I'm going to quickly read back through it and pull out some nuggets. But in fact, I got onto ChatGPT and I said, hey, the book, Let's Not Screw It, Let's Just Do It by Richard Branson, I need 5 nuggets out of that on this particular point. It was very narrow, and I narrowed it right down for ChatGPT. Bang, like that. I had the 5 points.
Yep.
Done. Right? So the question is, how can you use artificial intelligence to expedite things so you're not the bottleneck in your business?
Yeah. I think there are so many, like you were saying, there are so many different ways to do that.
Cool. All right. So we've spoken about how not to be the bottleneck. Let go of things, empower your people, trust your people, let them know that it's okay to make a mistake, build them up, set some boundaries around you, around them, around time, around what comes back to you, lock things into your calendar, and then consider what AI can do for you. I want, Caroline, if I can, to jump onto the question of authenticity. This is without notice, by the way. We'll do that just after this.
Thank you.
All right, so let's talk about authenticity. I was having a conversation with a mindset coach a couple of days ago, and we were talking about the power of being authentic. And I know that it's something that
I'm nervous where you're going to go.
Well-
I'm really nervous where you're going to go.
I was actually just going back to that conversation we had yesterday when you said to me, how do I deal with that? And I went, well, just be yourself, but don't be difficult. How do I say that?
Sometimes being yourself, I know for me personally, being yourself, it's probably your greatest asset, but also your biggest weakness.
In business, how important is it, do you think, to be your authentic self? And do you think that's changed over time? In other words, is it more or less important now?
I think it's more important now, but there's boundaries.
So let's park the boundaries. And of course, there is boundaries, but let's just park that for a second. Let's go back to why it's more important. What makes you say that it's more important now than it was?
Yeah, for sure. I think today, it doesn't matter where we look. Everything just seems so perfect. Everybody's lives seem so perfect. All the businesses seem so perfect. And that's just bullshit.
Yeah.
It is absolute bullshit. You look on social media and you think, wow, they're nailing it. They're getting the leads. They must be just raking in the money. They must have the happiest teams in the world because they're all bouncing around with each other.
Yeah, you never see what's on the cutting room floor though, mate, right? That's the highlight reel of life.
Yeah, it's just not real.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's okay to say, do you know what? What a shit day I've had just.
Yeah, I'm calling bullshit on that as well.
Yeah, do you know what?
Yeah.
This didn't work. This process or this task didn't work.
Yeah, something I ventured, something I gave a shot at.
Yeah. Let's revisit it and see what we can do better. Let's make the tweaks that need to happen.
100%. I'll tell you why I think authenticity is more important now. I think that, if you went back 5 or 6 years or maybe 10 years, you could kind of get away with being inauthentic because A, there weren't as many players in the marketplace in whatever industry you're in, most likely. You could kind of hide behind a lot of things, but the access to information, generally speaking, I think consumers are smarter now than they used to be. They're more informed, and that is even more so with AI now. So if you're not authentically yourself, I think there's two things. One, you run the risk that you're going to just get caught out because people are smarter than that now. But secondly, I think that the real risk with not being authentic is the authentic you is what gives you the ability to swim in the blue ocean as opposed to the red ocean. If you're just a copycat and you're not authentically, you're just the same as everybody else out there, right? So something Taki Moore says, right? He says, when you first start out, you might find someone who you copy, and you copy them because they've done really well. I don't know, he's done really well. I'm going to do exactly what he did. But if we use it in kind of music terms, at some stage you've got to stop being a cover band, and at some stage you've actually got to be authentically you, producing original stuff, whatever it may be. I saw this great thing on the news the other night about the Aussie band The Hard-Ons, right? And they're now in their 50s or something, and they were going, well, you know what, we never came out to be mainstream. And it's ironic they kind of made, whilst they might not have made mainstream, they've certainly made, pretty damn close to it. But, they call themselves The Hard-Ons. They had a punk style, they no shirts and all this sort of stuff, but they were authentically themselves. And so what they did is they found themselves this little niche in the industry because nobody else could be that. Right?
Yeah.
So if you can find yourself that authentic self, you're probably going to find yourself a niche in your industry, are you not?
I would think so. I mean, if your conversation piece naturally falls in, like in the coaching area, there's lots of different coaches. And if you have a coach that is talking on everything, then they're not the right coach for you. You want a coach that is, speaks a language that's natural to them because they're naturally going to be able to deliver information and help and support that's going to resonate at a higher value to you.
Yep. I'm going to close the loop here because we started this episode talking about bottlenecks, right? And we said, hey, if you don't want to be the bottleneck, here are the things you've got to do. You've got to trust people, move past the fear of letting go, set really clear boundaries, empower people, let them make mistakes, mentor them, support them, and not just people, but then look at what you can do with AI. We then moved into authenticity, and I think this is where it fits in. You can't be your authentic self if you're trying to be everything to everybody in your business. So as the business owner, if you're still trying to handle everything, then that is not what you set out to do. Do you know? So let's talk about somebody who is an accountant. So they set out to be an accountant because they really wanted to do accounting. If they are doing the accounting and they're managing the HR and they're managing every other aspect of the business and client relations and all of that sort of stuff, then they're not actually being their authentic self. And I reckon that's when people fall into a funk in their business. So the bottleneck and the authenticity, I think, are linked.
Yeah, I mean, you can't be, no disrespect to accountants. I know some very funny accountants.
We know some very funny accountants.
Yes.
Very talented accountants. Unfortunately, not creative.
Yes, you can't expect necessarily a numbers person or an analytical thinker to be able to naturally, authentically communicate with a creative thinker.
Correct.
Sometimes it'll just be chalk and cheese. It's a different language. You can't expect somebody who loves the behind the scenes, doing the data, the technical data stuff, to be able to be authentically communicating comfortably with somebody who is in a sales position. They're just going to be on different planets. And that's okay, because you need people who can work through those different processes.
Different skill sets.
You need to be able to have somebody who can coordinate all of those communication styles.
Because the risk you run is if you are that person you're trying to, if you are a data-centric person, if you're like a backroom person trying to communicate with a creative salesperson, and if all of the creative sales activity has to come through you because you're the boss, bingo, you're the bottleneck.
Yep.
If I look at in our mastermind business, when I have been the bottleneck, and I've been the bottleneck plenty of times, it is when I have been given or I've accepted the responsibility to do things that are not true to my authentic self.
Yes.
The shit that I hate.
The details.
I think I have the ability to work both in and out of detail. I can be a bit of a chameleon like that, but I mean, shit that I hate. Do you know? And if that stuff is left to me, I do become the bottleneck on it. Mark, can you help, when you put content planners together, and Mark, can you review the content planner? I mean, like spoon my left eyeball out. Do you know? That shit just bores the living crap out of me.
Yeah.
And so I go, yep, just leave it with me. And like, you're waiting for 2 weeks for it. I'm the bottleneck. The reason I'm the bottleneck is because I'm not being authentic to myself. What I should say to that is, you know what? That's not me. Get someone else to do that, and I'll do what I do, which is this: recording podcast, coaching clients, coming up with content, doing research, reading. Man, I'm in my happy place. That is my authentic self. But when I pretend to do something that's outside of, that's when I become the bottleneck. And I reckon that's the link between bottlenecks and authenticity.
Yeah.
And you would have seen that as well. And you're the same, by the way.
Yes, I am.
Right? You're exactly the same.
Anything technical, I'm just not interested.
Yeah.
Not interested. It
Just glaze over.
glaze over. And I think you give me 2 minutes. Yep.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Whatever you say.
Yep.
I'm happy with somebody else to make the decisions on any of the
That's right.
IT technical things.
Correct.
Because it's just not my flow.
Correct. So those sorts of planning things that you talk to me about, like just, I'd rather watch an episode of Downton Abbey than have to deal with that shit. That's saying something. All right. Good stuff. Good chat.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Here's what we've looked at, guys. We've looked at, if you're the bottleneck in your business, how do you move past being the bottleneck? We spoke about, all those things, but letting go, facing the fear, empowering people, setting boundaries. I think that setting boundaries is a really important thing. And then finally, we spoke about authenticity. And I just think that the link there is that if you're going to be authentically who you are, practicing your genius, working in the stuff that kind of makes you happy and being authentically true to that, you can't do that and doing the shit that you hate. that's how you'll become a bottleneck. These are the sort of things we talk about all the time in our mastermind program. So metropolemastermind.com.au. Love to have a chat about it. Until we chat next, please make sure you spend time with those who matter most.